secret chord they've been played and it pleased the Lord. You don't really care for me, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Faith was strong, but you needed proof. Saw her bathing on the roof, beauty and the moonlight moving through you. She tied you to a kitchen chair, she broke your throat, cut your hair. From your lips she drew the hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Say I took my name in vain, I don't even know the name. If I did, well, really, what's it to you? There's a blaze of light in every word, doesn't matter which you heard. The holy or the broken, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. I did my best, it wasn't much, couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. Told the truth, I didn't come to fool ya. Even though it all went wrong, stand before the Lord a song. Nothing on my tongue but hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Tonight is the Friday of Holy Week, the celebration in the Christian tradition called Good Friday, in remembrance of the prophetic resistance leader who threw a spoke into the wheel of empire in service of a greater love. On this Good Friday, we are remembering the 75th anniversary of the death of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German priest and prophet, dedicated to overthrowing the Nazi regime in Germany when many other Christian churches refused to do so. Bonhoeffer quote, "Sometimes we are not simply to bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself." This is the message of the Christian tradition, the redemptive work of love in the universe that leads to justice, that extinguishes the sin of the world, sin that we know as the separation that drives hatred, racism, sexism, ableism, and all oppressions. All those oppressions that are rooted in hierarchy, patriarchy, and systemic violence. Tonight we remember the cross that is a reminder that we are all connected, and that separation, that great sin with the capital S, is only an illusion. That all of us need all of us to make it. The illusion that there is an us and them, when there is only us. If you are part of that us, I invite you to grab a snack and a drink of your choice, participate in the Universalist Communion part of this Good Friday service. The reminder that we are not separate, but we are all connected, even when confined to our houses, confined to our places of work. That is the message of this Holy Week that is sometimes hard to hear. that we are all connected by that Christ light, that divine spark of creation that flows throughout all life forms, and that we are called to account for loving our separateness more than our oneness sometimes. Sometimes because we are taught to, sometimes because we are forced to, sometimes because we want to, selfishly. This week, tonight, this Sunday are a time to take stock and do better. A reminder that we are beings made of light, made for community. As we take this journey tonight, we will descend into darkness. But as we say back home, Sundays are coming, and there is always hope. If you would pray with me. God, who is light, in whom there is no darkness at all, and in Jesus the Christ, the light of the world, this is the pronouncement, that light has come into the world, and yet we have loved darkness rather than light. May we be reconciled unto that fact today. May we remember tonight that the light within you can never be extinguished. The light within us may never be extinguished. May we hold on to that which is good, connect with those other beings of light to shine a light more radiant than the world has ever seen. May we remember that darkness needs the light, and the light needs the darkness. But the light that is in you shines brighter than all. Amen. On the night in which he gave himself over to be crucified, he took bread, ate with his disciples in a holy meal to remember that they were one. After he gave thanks to God, he broke the bread, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Whenever you do this in remembrance of me." After supper, likewise, he took the cup of wine, and when he had given thanks and blessed it, he gave it to his disciples and said, "Drink from this, all of you. This is my blood of the new and unending covenant, poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sin. Whenever you drink this, do this in remembrance of me." Later, Jesus went forth with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden, where he and his disciples entered into that place known as Gethsemane. Now Judas, who betrayed him, came along, procuring a band of soldiers, and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees went there. And Jesus, knowing all that was to befall him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them, and when he said to them, "I am he drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he, so if you seek me, let these men, my disciples, go." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave's ear and cut it off. The slave's name was Malchus, and Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall not I drink the cup which the Father has given me?" So the band of soldiers and their captain and officers of the Judean authorities seized Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had given counsel to the religious authorities that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and the woman who guarded the gate of Caiaphas' house said to Peter, "Are you not also one of the man's disciples?" He said, "I'm not." Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and the teaching, and Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all Jewish people come together. I have said nothing secretly. Why do you ask me?" And those who have heard me what I said to them, they know what I said." When he had said this, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken wrongly, bear witness to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and they said to him, "Are you not also one of his disciples?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a kinsman of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once the rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not an evildoer, we would not have handed him over." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The religious authorities said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." This was to fulfill the word which Jesus had spoken, to show by what death he was to die. Pilate entered the headquarters and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say any of this on your own accord, or did others say this to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kinship is not of this world. If my kingship were of this world, my servants would fight, that I might not be handed over to religious authorities, but my kingship is not from this world." Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, for this I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after Pilate had said this, he went to the religious authorities again and told them, "I find no crime in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. Will you have me release for you the king of the Jews?" The religious authorities cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Barabbas was a robber. Then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in purple robe, and they came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no crime in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no crime in him." The religious authorities answered, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard these words, he was more afraid. He entered the headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who has delivered me to you has the greater sin." Upon this, Pilate sought to release him, but the religious authorities cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king sets himself against Caesar." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of the preparation of Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the religious authorities, "Behold your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." They handed him over then to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. Pilate also wrote a title and put it on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." Many of the Judeans read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. It was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. The soldiers cast lots for his clothes, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing near, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. And then after this, Jesus, knowing that it was all now finished, said, "I thirst." A bowl full of vinegar stood there. So they put a sponge full of the vinegar on hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." He bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Since it was the day of preparation, in order to prevent the bodies from remaining on the cross on the Sabbath, the high day, the religious authorities asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. After this, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, for fear of the religious authorities, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him leave. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also, who had at first come to him by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. They took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen cloths, and with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. In the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb where no one had ever been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, as the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. Friends, and thus we remember the great life and great death of the one who would call us to remember that we are not separate, but are united in that great body of Christ, the light that shines from within all life beings. May we remember the example. May we remember the death. May we remember Friday and look forward to the hope of Sunday that comes. Ever present, always there, always shining. Go in peace, my friends.